Okay, so this is why I am a never Dem type person. I was fairly progressive for my adult life. It was the in thing to hate George W. Bush. And even now that I have gotten into accepting even just looking at what conservatism has to say as opposed to just being what liberalism says I should be, which is how I used to be, George W. Bush was pretty terrible. But so I just kind of got, roped in with everybody else. And so I found myself in the 2015 primary season rooting for Bernie. But I've always been a truther. Since '03, I couldn't find work around town. I had to get to Iowa City to find something I liked doing. That's an hour drive from here. I had to commute an hour daily. And standing in the break room at this call center, watching on the screens with a Desert Storm vet who I worked with standing next to me, and we were just like, Jesus Christ, what the fuck? I was like, she goes, I can't believe they're actually going there. And I was like, why do they have cameras on the tanks? Why are we seeing night vision bumper cam first person of tanks rushing across the desert? This is propaganda. And it was just like, that was the activation of the red pill, as it were. I just was like, what the fuck is going on here? And since then, I've always just looked for, if there's a conversation being had about some shit that don't make sense, I'm curious about what they're wondering. As well as I learned how to see it and discern it for myself. So my use of logic has been an ongoing thing in that respect since at least 2003, where my subconscious internalization of the rules of logic, not just debate, but of cause and effect and consistency, honesty, things making sense. And when something doesn't make sense, if there's a reason, and things like, there are illogical things, but there are often logical reasons for illogical things. So it's not like out of the realm of cognition for somebody who only thinks in terms of logic. Another thing with me is I use a lot of, since I was a preteen, I've used a lot of self-hypnosis, so the logic is just on. I always knew that it was a lesser evil thing, even getting into Bernie. Because there were logistics to what everybody was getting behind with that nobody wanted to talk about. And my issue had been since about 2008 when I was like, I had a coincidence of lunar calendar, Buddha's birthday and my birthday were the same. I turned 28. I decided it was time to seek enlightenment. And one of the things that I came to in that time, that quest of understanding, of finding meaning and purpose and something, deeper truth and whatever, was you can't just bring complaints. You have to bring solutions. And free stuff for everyone does not constitute a solution. There must be a plan. There must be logistics. And if you don't have that, don't come to the fucking table, Bernie. But he didn't have that. He was a cheerleader, a rallying cry, a figure to get behind. That bullshit with the bird, get out of here. But the other thing was, I watched what they did during the primary and the caucuses. I watched what they did in Iowa. I watched what they did on the national one. And on the national one, it was wild. They had, on TV news in the mainstream, they were telling people those weird yellow colored shirts some people were wearing were special helpers. The reality is they were ungreen screenable shirts because people were wearing Bernie or Bust shirts that they were getting the footage and then releasing for the news, having CGI'd like a filter, adding every one of those Bernie or Bust shirts, turning into an I'm with her shirt. It was just a kick in the nuts and a spit in the face to anyone that seriously supported Bernie. To anyone that put their faith in the Democrat Party. It was not okay. And they kept doing it. They had white noise generators to drown out the chants. They cut the lights over the sections where people had signs. You could occasionally still see some stuff. But eventually it started looking like a freaking rock concert where only the stage was illuminated and there was things that going on that you couldn't hear the rest of the audience. It was just a wash. So all you could really get then was what was being said on the stage. It was a coronation. It turned out Bernie didn't read something he signed. I have a real issue with people, especially when they get into politics, things that do with legislation. They get into legally binding circumstances where they did not read the terms before agreeing. Hillary Clinton had purchased her right to control the Democrat Party before Bernie ever signed up to caucus with the party that year. The year before, she had paid off their debt and advanced them other money out of her personal war chest in exchange for executive control of the party for the next election cycle. Bernie signed up his contract terms that he apparently didn't read or didn't think about or didn't bother to check up on it. Like, like there's no shenanigans. We won't ever look over our shoulder for anything. There's no need. That's how you get stabbed in the back. At 2, Bernie. So what happened was he signed a thing saying that once he caucused, he would agree to abide by whatever decisions the Democrat Party and its executive controllers, or whatever the term was, decreed. So if they went through the whole thing, and even if you won and they decided it would be executive producer Hillary Clinton instead, that's what they're going to do. And that's what you signed up for. And that's what happened. Can't be mad at anybody but Bernie over that, really. That's what I came to. That's why I was like, you know what? Fuck all this shit. Gone. I did it before it was cool. And then other people started coming around to the same thing. Jimmy Dore was right on that. He was like, what the fuck, Bernie? And it's like, yeah, man. But guess what? Here's the thing. My parents both passed away from cancer. The treatment was enormously expensive, and it did not work. We're talking a couple $100,000 for a couple years. Who has $50,000 per person per year for something with a 3% success rate? In order to do Medicare for all, what is required is nationalizing all health insurance, folding it into a government program, forcing the hospitals to control the cost. Because previously what happens is people throw into insurance. People pay into their Medicare and Medicaid. And these services pay for, without direct related regard to the amount of money contributed by the individual users, whatever it is they're supposed to have. Now in Canada, the way they do that is kind of like taking our version of what we have going on right now and just making it nationalized. And what that has ultimately come to is a capitalistic, in a sense, at least by the numbers kind of thing. It's an economic, they're trying to save money by offering suicide kits. I'm sorry, that's what it is. That's dumb. Right now, MAID is the leading cause of death in Canada. That is their Medicare for All program functioning as it is intended to. If it was to work correctly here, you would have to nationalize insurance, fold it into Medicaid and Medicare, provide equal service to literally everyone, effectively for free to them, except for their tax contribution, which would go significantly up. There is a limit to how many facilities there are, and once this ceases to be a highly lucrative practice, you're not going to have a shitload more doctors opening up new hospitals. You're going to have a limited number of places with actual skilled professionals that aren't just doing it for the money, that are going to charge highly for their expertise, or you're going to get some schlub that charges cheap. The government's going to pay for it, but the government's going to force them to keep the prices down if it's going to work right. The insurance is willing to pay whatever, so the doctors charge whatever, and it's enormous. They're going to have to take that down. You're going to have to nationalize that insurance industry, which means taking all those people's jobs and saying, if you want to keep your job, that's cool, but now you work for us. I mean, we're talking about wiping out an industry of people's employment. The whole thing is needs of the many over the needs of the few. Equity, right? Those people at the insurance companies, though the insurance thing is kind of a scam and you might think negatively of people in a general sense that work in that industry, are still people with jobs and families and all that, just like you and me, with the same rights. That's what equity means. You got to hold yourself to it, though. If you're going to talk about equity, you got to hold yourself to it. So that's why that kind of stuff doesn't work. They don't bring that. They don't mean that. It's not good faith. Just because somebody says a thing you like to hear doesn't make them worth your time. Once you figure out the pattern of dishonesty, that's it. At least as far as I go. When I figure that out, I'm like, okay, done. You've proven to me that you're a liar. You've proven to me that there's bad faith. I'm not even going to take you seriously at this point. I might keep track of what you're doing because know thine enemy, but and in the subsequent years since Trump got in, I have watched the Democratic Party be anything but democratic, and I've watched them be anything but good. And so many people are just convinced that's the side of good, and it's like, no, I'm sorry, no, it's not. It's just not. It's dishonest to say that it is. But I want good thing. Okay, but you obviously don't understand what it takes to get good thing, and they're obviously not intending to give good thing in the right way, which leads to bad thing. Much worse bad thing. Nationalized, socialized healthcare. You're going to get MAID, which is government sanctioned assisted getting rid of the sick, which is eugenics. All of these are a step in the wrong direction. Trust me, my ancestors are from Europe. They moved here right before Hitler took over for a reason. Don't let it happen here. That's what I'm all about. And I see that party doing that. That's why I'm not into it. So I'll be done here with this. I'm going to compress this or whatever, lower the resolution so it doesn't take near as long to upload. That's where I'm coming from on it. And as far as the Republican Party goes, I don't think that they're a bunch of bigots or anything like that necessarily. I just think they're a bunch of boomers predominantly. And I can 100% respect the ones that actually live by their standards and their principles. That's important because the people in the Democrat side of things that I've seen really don't have any of those. They don't have principles. They're unfortunately, the mass thing is the idea of stand for nothing, fall for anything. And it just keeps happening over and over and over. And I'm immune to that, so I cannot join that or condone that. So at least when I pay attention to things on both sides of that, the thing that I find respectable on the right is that like they have convictions and they stick to them. And honestly, most of the family value stuff and a lot of the things that are in the Bible are actually there is some science that backs up a lot of those things as having positive impact on culture and society. And in case you hadn't noticed, the decay of culture and society leads to a lot more worse bad things.